All right. So today we're going to build a very interesting project. And as you can probably see from the title I gave this project, we're going to be building our very own weather app. Okay. So this app is going to get some real-time data from the internet about any location in the world that we are interested in seeing the weather for. For example, if I wanted to see what the weather is like in Paris, I would enter Paris into my weather app and it should give me the current weather in Paris. So first, set up the project. You can give it whatever name you want. In my case, I gave it the weather app as the name. And now inside my manifest file, I'm going to add the permission for internet access. There we go. So now that I've specified that my app is going to be using the internet, next thing is to import or use that Volley library. Okay. I'm going to add that here. Okay, so now this Volley library should be available to us for use. Now, going back to my main activity, let's go ahead and use this Volley library for request. So first, I'm just going to create my request queue. Oops, I forgot to sync my project after adding this library. So I'm just going to go ahead and sync it. As you can see, I can import the class now. Okay, so now that we have our request queue here, we can now create the requests that we're going to be adding to this queue. So before we even start creating that request, let's talk about the website we're going to use for our weather app, or the website that is going to provide the data for our weather app. So the website we're going to use here is openweathermap.org. And this website provides an API that we can use to get the weather information of any location in the world. Okay, so I'm just going to go to the API to see how it looks. And just to summarize all of this for you, so this website will most likely give us a response that looks kind of like this. And depending on the location that we enter, we'll get information about the weather, such as the temperature, what it feels like, the max and min temperature for the day, humidity, so even visibility, the cloud coverage, when the sun is going to set, when the sun is going to rise, and so forth. Okay. And for our API calls, we can request it by city name, can even use a zip code. And we can change the type of measurements, whether we want it to be in Celsius or Fahrenheit. So as you can see, this is a very powerful website that gives us a lot of data that we can use to build our very own weather app. So the URL we'll use for our request will look something like this. Okay, so we'll have this URL and then the name of the city and the API key. I'll go into much more detail later on, but let's get back to building our app here. Okay, so now that we know that our request is going to be in a JSON format, let's create a JSON request. Okay, so this is our JSON request right here. So the next thing we'll need to do is fill in the necessary information, such as the URL, and the actions we want to take when we receive a response or an error. So let's do that. Now let's talk about the URL. Okay. So if we go back to our API website, so we can see here that this is an example of a request. So I'm just going to copy this and I'll paste it in here. And I'm going to use my API key for this website. Okay. So this is just an API key that is personal to me. I don't mind sharing it. You can use this if you need to for demo purposes. But if you plan on actually building and sharing this app, I recommend that you sign up on Open Weather Map. It's entirely free and you can get your own API key, which you can use for whatever you need. So this API key here is limited. So just keep that in mind, just in case you try it out and it doesn't work for you. You can always create your own API key on this website. Okay, so let's capture the response that we're going to get from this website. So the good thing here is that it gives us a little bit of a description of what the response will look like. So looking at this, we can see that we have a JSON object here. And within that JSON object, we have a section for coordinates, weather, base, main, and so forth. Okay. Let's think about what exactly we need. Okay. So for our app, the information that will be relevant or the information that will be important for us would be the temperature, maybe the humidity, and yeah, let's just get those two just to keep it simple. Actually, let's include the description as well. Okay. So we're going to get those three items. So first, let's just check the information we're going to get for this main section, just to make sure our app is working perfectly fine. Okay, so I'm just getting that main section, but it looks like now I'm going to need to surround that in a try catch block to handle any type of errors that may be thrown. And let's display this data on our text view over here. So let's give this an ID. We'll call it output text. And we can use that in our code. So once I get a response from the website, I'm going to set the text of my output text to the response that I receive, which in this case, I have stored in the variable called data. And for our error section, we can just simply display some error message. Okay, so now that this part is complete, all we need to do is now add this JSON request that we've created to the request queue so that it can be processed. Okay, so the reason why this is getting underlined is because I forgot to put this inside my onCreate method, which is this initial method that runs everything. So let me just copy and highlight this entire code, and I'm going to move it into this onCreate method, and that should resolve the issue. Okay, so now hopefully if I run this app right now, I should get the weather information for the city that is specified here, which is London. So let me go ahead and launch my app. Okay, so now you can see that we have some information here. The text is really tiny, but at least we're getting some information from the website. First, let me just increase the size of this text over here. And I'm going to go ahead and rerun the application. Okay, so now the text is a lot bigger. So this right here is the weather information for London, for at least this main section over here. So depending on where you're from, you might be perfectly okay with Fahrenheit, but I'm going to change this to Celsius. And let's see if there is some information about how to do that. If we want to get the temperature in Celsius, we have to make the units metric. So I guess all I need to do is add this to the end of my URL, and it should give me information in Celsius. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, perfect. It's working just like we were expecting. But now what I want to do is extract just this specific information right here, this 14.93, because we're not really interested in what the temperature feels like or the min and max of the day. We're only interested for now in the current temperature. Here on our website, we can see that within this main portion, there is a temperature section. So what I'm going to do, instead of converting the main section to a string, I'm going to use the get string, and I'm going to get specifically the temp. So let me just update this variable name just to make it match the type of data that I'm trying to retrieve. And since this is Celsius, I'm just going to add a C at the end just to indicate that the temperature is in Celsius. So let me rerun this app. Perfect. So as you can see here, we have the current temperature right now in London, England. Okay, so now let's see if we can get the current temperature of a different place. So let's try Toronto. So based on the API's documentation, we know that this section right here is what we need to update to change the location. So I'm just going to rerun this, and hopefully I'm going to see a different number unless they both have the exact same temperature. Okay, so now this is the current temperature in Toronto. Okay, so we mentioned that we wanted to get the data for a couple of other things. The other one was humidity, okay? So let's take a look at what or where we can find humidity. So that's also within this main section. So that means all I need to do is modify this right here to humidity. I don't need to append this C at the end, so I'll just remove that. And now I should have another variable that has the humidity. And since this is a percentage value, I can just add a percent at the end to make it user friendly. And I'm going to display a user friendly message. Okay, so it should say temperature, and then below that, it should show the humidity. So I'm just going to go ahead and rerun this application. Okay, great. So far we're making some good progress. So the last piece of data that I wanted to collect from this website is the information about the description. Okay, so specifically this data item right here. So as you can see, this is not inside the main section, but inside the weather section right here. So let's see if we can modify, or let's see if we can extract that piece of data. Okay, so within our weather, we're going to have that description. Okay, so let's run our code. Okay, so it looks like we encountered an error, or a program just crashed. Let's figure out why. Okay, so looking at the error message, it looks like we are running into a JSON exception, which most likely means that the way we're collecting this description is not correct. So I can already see what the issue is here. So here, this indicates that this is an array item, okay? So you have to pay very close attention to these JSON structures. So these brackets indicate that this is a regular JSON object, but these square brackets show that this is a JSON array. Within the weather, I have an array of just one item, and then within that first element, or the first array item, I have this information here. Seems a bit confusing, but just remember that whenever you're working with JSON, you have to pay close attention to the differences, such as the objects, the arrays, or the strings. So in this case, instead of a JSON object, I'm going to use JSON array. And then I'm going to get the first element of that array. So that's 0. I'm going to cast it as a JSON object. Because I can only use this get string on a JSON object. So this should hopefully work now. Within my JSON array, I'm getting the first item, and then I'm getting the description section. Let me rerun this. Perfect. Now, as you can see, the description is that the weather is just mist. Let's see if we can get another location. Let's see what the weather right now is in Spain. So as you can see, it's clear skies in Spain right now. Okay, so of course, we don't want to keep updating this section in our code whenever we're looking for the weather information for another city, country, or region, okay? We want the user to be able to provide the location you're looking for inside the app. So let's change the app design, or that layout, to include a section where the user can enter some information. Okay, so first I'm just going to add an input section. And once the user is done adding the input, I want the user to be able to confirm their input by clicking a button. And also, let's add a title, okay? And the title will probably just have the name of the city that we're getting the weather information for. Let's make it a big title. I think 60 should be fine. Just constrain this to the top. For the ID, we'll call this city name or just city text. And let's add some padding to the top, and let's constrain the button to the bottom. You know what? I'll just leave the button name as is. You can just call it button. We'll also add some padding at the bottom. And let's constrain the rest of the items on the screen. Or you know what? Let's leave this one blank, and then we'll make the title here say weather app. And for the location, all I've done is made a hint here that shows that the user should enter a location. And I'm going to change the ID to location input. Okay, perfect. That's all there is to it for now. So what I'm going to do is now add all the elements I created in my design view. I'm going to add it to the code. Okay, so now I have my 3 additional items, which is the title text, the submit request button, and the location input. So what I'm going to do here is update my title text. I'll set the text to whatever city or location that the user enters. So that means I have to create a location variable that keeps track of the location. Let me make it a global variable. So I'll put it up here. So let's just make the default location Nairobi. In that case, let me also display that the default here is Nairobi. So essentially, when the app launches, the first thing that, or the first weather that would be displayed by default would be whatever this location variable is. In this case, it's Nairobi. So I'm going to update this section right here to be the location that the user entered. Okay, so let me check what the app looks like so far. Okay, so far it's looking great. It looks like it's a little bit cold in Nairobi, Kenya right now, but it's very humid. And we have some broken clouds in the air. Essentially, what I want to happen is the user can enter whatever location here, and then when they hit this button right here, it should update this to the city that they entered. Before we do that, let's change the text on this button to something more meaningful. So instead of just saying button, let's make it say check weather. Okay, so now let's write the code for this button. Okay, so here I'm going to add the code for the button. So essentially, when I click this button, the first thing I want to do is update this location variable based on the location input, and then rerun this whole entire piece of code here. So let's do that. So outside this on create method, I'm going to create another method. What should I call this method? We'll call it check weather. Okay, so now I'm going to just move this and place this in here. And it looks like we have some red highlights. That is because these variables are not in the scope of this method. So all I need to do now is make these global variables. So I'll put them here. Okay, so first we have our output text. So this should be fine now. Now let's do the same for the title text. And finally, this request queue over here, let's do the same for that. So just so that this is not redundant and we're not redeclaring these types, I'm just going to remove this from here. And now hopefully this should be fine. So now initially when we launch our app, we want to call this check weather. And we also want to call this check weather whenever we click this button. So let's try this out. Okay, so by default, it shows Nairobi. Let's check China. There we go. It's working as we expect. Let's check India. There, so we have a fully working app. Let's check one more country. Let's check the Philippines. So as you can see, this works for both countries. It could also work for regions, or it can even work for cities. So let's see Accra, Ghana. It's working just as we expected. Okay, so there's one final thing I want to do to improve this weather app. Okay. So if you notice here, we have something here called icon. And let's see what this icon thing is about. It's just the weather icon. So what exactly does that section do? Okay. If we look closely, we can see that for each icon, we have some type of string. Okay. And this website, Open Weather, provides some images for the weather condition. So for example, if we see 10N, it would basically mean nighttime rain. And we'll see this icon over here. So to make our app look a little bit more interesting, let's try to also display an icon that describes the weather condition. So to do that, we need to use it in a format like this. Okay, so for example, if I paste this inside my URL, depending on what this code right here is, I'll get a different image. So let's see what 10N looks like, or 10D. And let's see what 11D looks like. Okay, that's thunderstorms. So we're going to add this functionality to our app. Now all we need to do is add an image right here in our app. Right now, this image looks a little too big, so let's make it 150 by 150. Okay, so now how exactly are we going to update this image? So the good thing with Android is that there's several different libraries out there that we can use to achieve whatever we want to do within our app. Okay. So just like how we use the Volley library to communicate with the internet, we're going to use another library that would help us load images to our image views from the internet. Okay, so now that I have implemented this, let me sync my project so that I can use this library. In the meantime, I'm going to also add that image view that I just added to my screen. Okay, so using this Glide library is actually quite simple. Okay, so what I'm going to do here after I get the response is just to use this glide, I'm going to load this specific URL. This is just to test. Eventually, I'm going to make this dynamic, but I just want to make sure it's working. So my image view looks like I need to make this a global variable as well. So hopefully any image that I find on the internet, I can put it into this image view. Let's run this code and see what it looks like. Perfect. So we have an image here. And as you can see, this doesn't match exactly what the description is. It says clear sky, but we've seen rain here. And that is only because we've hard coded this image, but we want to make it dynamic based on the weather information we get. So to do that, let's take a look at our JSON one more time. So as you can see, within this weather section is where we can find this icon string. So I'm going to collect that string information. Okay, so within the weather, we're getting this icon, and I'm going to modify this right here to show or to use the string icon data that we receive from the website. Okay, so now let's go ahead and reload this. Hopefully everything is working as expected. Beautiful. As you can see, it's clear sky, and we see, I guess this is supposed to be a sun, so it's a clear sky. Let's see what the weather is like in Virginia. Okay, so we see a few clouds, and we can see that there's some cloud cover here. Let's check Nigeria. So we have overcast clouds. And just because I can, let me check a few more places. Let's see what the weather is like in Texas. Damn, looks like it's cloudy in a lot of places, but it's pretty warm. And let's see Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. So this is a very useful API that you can use to tell the weather very quickly. Okay. This is actually even faster than some of the weather apps that I have on my phone. Okay, so we've covered quite a lot in just this demo app that we've built. We learned how to use some custom libraries to retrieve some images from the web and display it on our image view. We also talked more about how we can use this Volley library to communicate with websites and extract some data. Okay, so we are finished with our app. I'm actually so proud of the progress that we've made.